Welcome to AskFOI, where we answer the most common questions we receive about prophecy, Israel, and the Bible. With me today is David Gunn. Good to see you, David.
Thank you, Steve. Good to be here.
David, I'm excited for you to answer today's question. This is a question that's been very popular, and it's about Revelation 11, where we see the two witnesses. They're prophesying for 1,260 days, and the church won't be here. This is during the tribulation, so we're not here, but what can you tell us about the two witnesses that are witnessing past the church age in the tribulation? Who are they and what do they do?
It's an interesting couple of figures that we encounter here in Revelation 11. I can see why this would be a popular and a common question. This is, in fact, the only place that we encounter these characters here in Revelation chapter 11. Obviously, they are God's witnesses. That's the term that's used to describe them, meaning they are bearing witness to God. Probably carries with it sort of that Old Testament connotation of two witnesses being needed to establish something in a court of law. So they are proclaiming truth about God during the tribulation period. Taking up their station in Jerusalem, evidently, based on the description here, possibly right there next to the tribulation temple. The temple is mentioned just before the two witnesses, so that's an inference that some have made. And as you pointed out, they are said to speak and to prophesy for 1,260 days. That would be 3.5 years, presumably either the first half or the second half of the tribulation, and opinions are mixed on which half it's going to be. Personally, I lean toward the first half, but others go with the second half. It's not entirely clear in the text, so that's one of those areas on which there can be disagreement. It seems like they're cut from the same kind of cloth as the Old Testament Hebrew prophets, right? You have them described as receiving the authority and receiving the power to perform these miracles of judgment that are very similar to some of the miracles of judgment that we see in the Old Testament, when God is pouring out his wrath on evildoers and so on. Eventually, they're slain by the Antichrist. It says that their bodies lie in the streets of Jerusalem for 3 days, after which they are very dramatically and spectacularly resurrected by God, presumably, and they ascend bodily up into heaven. And that is basically all we're told about them in the Bible. The big question that people oftentimes have is, what is their identification? And there's a very long tradition of holding that perhaps these are two Old Testament characters sort of brought back from the dead, returned to planet Earth or something like this. The early church held pretty widely that this would be the return of Enoch and Elijah. The assumption there being that because these were the two individuals who did not undergo physical death in the Old Testament, but rather were assumed bodily into heaven, that they would return to earth at some point in the future. So that has been a common view in church history. More commonly today, a lot of commentators and theologians believe that these are Moses and Elijah sent back to earth to carry out this end times mission. And the reason for that is that if you read about the miracles that they're performing, it seems to match very closely the historical miracles that Elijah and Moses were carrying out and performing during their time on earth in the Old Testament. And then a third option is that they're just two unidentified Israelite people, and we just don't know who exactly they will be. They'll just be two Jewish men who are called to this particular ministry of witnessing to God and serving as his prophets in the tribulation when the time comes. So any of those are live options, and beyond spelling out those options, I'm not sure I can say dogmatically which one it's going to be, because the text just doesn't explicitly tell us.
So I mentioned that this is not in the church age, and we have a sense of what it means to be a witness in the church age. This is much different, isn't it, what they're accomplishing?
Yeah, I mean, there would be some overlap, I would assume. Some amount of gospel proclamation, no doubt, will be included here because they are testifying to the truth of God, the truth of Jesus Christ. And so there would be some similarities. But at the same time, you're quite right that they are ministering in a unique period of human history. They are speaking God's judgment against the Antichrist and his regime, and obviously that's not something that's going on right now. So I'm sure their preaching is going to take on a slightly different tenor than the gospel proclamation that we are involved in today.
So you would say we need to be open-minded and not take a strict view, to be open on some of these variations that you mentioned.
I think so. When Scripture is not abundantly clear on some of these details, it is interesting to speculate and to play with some of the possibilities, but I do think it's important to be non-dogmatic. If you held a gun to my head and told me I had to pick one of the options, I would probably lean toward Moses and Elijah. That seems like a good case, but at the end of the day, we just can't be sure about those details.
Yeah, and that's wise advice to stay open on those things and not create more controversy and arguments. So thank you, David. This was really helpful.
Thank you.